My thoughts on the air crash and what no one seems to be talking about. And I find this very, very, very strange. As some of you know, I used to fly aeroplanes, not the 787, which is a very, very safe aircraft based on records. But I just want to say a few things that no one seems to be talking about here. So let's roll backwards, and I'm not going to be too long. We're not going to go into the details. I'm just going to go into common sense on what I see. Yes, on what I see, based on the videos that have been made available. Firstly, on some of the detailed video that is available, the flaps and the slats look like they were deployed. What I find interesting is post-takeoff, the landing gear was never retracted. Okay, that's an interesting thing. Why was the landing gear not retracted? So when you take off an aircraft, you have what's called a positive rate of climb, and the two pilots will agree that, and then one pilot will say, landing gear up. Someone then goes down, picks the wheel, and lifts the landing gear up. That doesn't seem to have happened. So that tells me that there was a problem prior to takeoff. Let's roll it back a bit more. When you are going down a runway in an aeroplane, and this does change for different aeroplanes, there is a line in the runway, not a physical line, but a line in the runway called the point of no return. At that moment, as you are going down the runway, you then have two choices. You either take off or you do not take off. I do suspect that prior to the point of no return, just prior to the point of no return, the pilots of this 787 were already struggling with something. And they had a choice. Following probably the standard operating procedures for that airline and that aircraft, they would have had to take off. Now, as a pilot, you have two choices. You either keep going straight on down the runway and crash, or you take off and try to manage the problem whilst you are taking off. In this case, they will have taken off and they were struggling with whatever it is, and all the energy in the aircraft that's moving forward has allowed them to get to an altitude of some 425 feet. And then it went into what's known as a flare situation, which is like when it comes into land. So the nose is up and it's come down and flared into the buildings, wherever it may be, into the doctor's dormitory or whatever. So I think that the aircraft was already having problems on the runway as it was accelerating in readiness to take off. What that problem is, I'm not going to claim that it was a bird strike or anything like that, but they were already having problems. But they'd gone past the point of no return and either went straight on and crashed or took off. And they did take off. Now, as you can hear when the aircraft is descending, it appears that the rat or the ram air turbine is deployed. It's a very specific sound. It almost sounds like a turboprop aircraft when they're flying. And if you listen to the audio, it sounds like the rat is deployed, which means there's a catastrophic system failure in the aircraft because the rat is deployed automatically. The pilot doesn't flick a switch and then suddenly the rat comes out. I suspect that as they were rolling down the runway, going back to the runway, as they were rolling down the runway, the pilots knew that something was happening. They'd reached the point of no return, had to make a decision of going straight on or taking off. When they took off, they were at the very end of the runway, which is also unusual because as they took off, there was a lot of dust that came up off the ground. So they took off, probably reluctantly, yeah? And ultimately, so that was the cause. The effect is it got up into the air and then it had to come down because of lack of power. It's a really sad situation, but I can't understand why no one's talking about the event on the runway, yeah? Everybody's talking about it taking off and then coming down. That's just the effect. What was the cause? I think the issue started on the runway for the two pilots involved. Both pilots, massive experience. Yeah, I suspect that this is a catastrophic systems failure on the aircraft for whatever reason. I don't know what that reason is, but you really need to start looking at what was happening on the runway. I find it incredible that this aircraft took off right at the end of the runway. So from a pilot perspective, you have no choice. You either go straight on and crash into what's in front of you, or you take off. And in this case, the pilots took off. There was obviously no clear signal in the cockpit to say positive rate of climb, retract landing gear. That didn't happen. So because the landing gear was never retracted. So they knew something was going wrong all the way from taking off, never mind coming down into the building where the Doctor University was. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Please comment below. Very, very sad situation for all these people that have been killed. Very sad situation. That's my thought. I can't understand why no one's discussing this on the news. All these captains obviously haven't experienced something similar to this. I did. I was overweight. It's my fault. I was overweight. It was a short runway. The runway was ascending. It was a hot day. Everything was against me and I just made it. I never made that mistake again, being overweight. However, hope you found this informative. All my thoughts go out to those that have been impacted by this flight and crash. See you soon. Comment below.